Hello. You are listening to Eye on Sci-Fi Podcast, the podcast where we share with you terrific indie, science fiction, and fantasy, online short films, web series, and other closely related media. We also, on occasion, have conversations with the interesting and talented creators who are producing terrific indie speculative work. Thank you for joining me. I am your host, Rod Faulkner, and this episode features a very special returning guest to the podcast. Dan Abella is the founder and lead programmer for the New York Science Fiction Film Festival. The festival will be conducting its fifth event this year in New York City, and Dan joins us to talk about this year's slate of programming. Dan is such a great guest, and we always have a terrific conversation. So, without further ado, please enjoy our latest conversation with Dan Abella, the founder of the New York Science Fiction Film Festival. Dan Abella, welcome back, sir, to Eye on Sci-Fi Podcast.
Thanks for having me back, Rod. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think it's been exactly 1 year when we talked about the New York Science Fiction Film Festival last year.
Got it. Wow.
I'm excited to talk to you about the New York Science Fiction Film Festival. It makes me wish that I lived in New York and not down south. But we have you back to talk about this year's festival, which will be the 8th that you all have had,
Oh, this
won't
is
it? Because it started in
this is
20.
the fifth, I believe.
Oh, it is
Yeah.
the 5th. Okay. Because it started in 2017,
Got
did it
it.
not?
There were a couple of years we didn't do it, and I
Okay.
think we got that this following one was in 2020, so that would explain it. Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, for everyone that's listening, please share what the New York Science Fiction Film Festival is about and what is its mission.
Well, up until 2017, there was no New York Sci-Fi Festival. There were festivals that were more on the horror end that featured sci-fi movies, but there was nothing like that in the city. So I thought myself and a couple of us decided to put together something that would showcase films or from New York as well as international indie sci-fi directors. Films that focus on good, solid science fiction, not just effects driven or just bizarre, crazy Ed Wood style, but something that would appeal to the mind as well as to the heart. Something that made us think, something that, especially in the kind of times we live in. I think more than ever, we need science fiction to make sense of the upside down world we all live in.
Absolutely. I would agree. Science fiction that has substance
Exactly.
and style.
Exactly. More than ever. I tell people, while there was a time when science fiction was just entertainment, now it seems like it's all caught up, or rather, we've caught up with it. Um, Take the example of AI. Now they're talking about the possibility within the next 2 or 3 years of having um, generalized artificial intelligence, which is essentially sentient AI. Whether that happens or not, just the talk of that is indicative that of the kind of times we live in.
Well, Dan, put a pin in that thought because we're going to circle back to it in our chat. But what are the main themes of this year's Science Fiction Film
We
Festival
got
in New York?
an amazing assortment of science fiction and some supernatural films from all over the world. We got features for some of them are East Coast premieres. For instance, we got The Distant Jump, which is an East Coast premiere. We also have a film called Rufus, which is also an East Coast premiere. We got a documentary called Loch Ness, They Created a Monster, which is actually an also East Coast premiere. In addition to that, we have an amazing selection of short sci-fi films from all over the world, from China, Singapore, Bahrain, India, South America, the US, UK, Europe. So it's really excited to have this really amazing selection of films.
what I find very impressive about the programming that you and your team put together is that it truly is international. And I think that that is important to not only have science fiction that makes you think, but also narratives that are told from different perspectives. And having international filmmakers involved, I think that is a fantastic way to get that done.
Time when we are so divided by ideology and politics, I would look to science fiction as a kind of a universal language that we can all kind of agree upon. And maybe through it, we can come to a better understanding of ourselves as being part of a much larger um, community. Like, for instance, Star Trek, right? Star Trek, the old classic Star Trek from back in the 60s, right? The original, the OG ones, right? Those were stories. It was a message, not just entertainment, but how humans can get along. So I think that in that sense, science fiction serves a strong cultural and social cohesive element that we so much need in this day and age.
I would agree. And it really uniquely has the ability to reflect the human condition back at us, even though the circumstances are more speculative, more a little fantastical, but we can recognize ourselves in so many different narratives in science fiction. And again, that's something that I really do appreciate about your festival and the different types of films that you all program, even within the genre. So you mentioned The Long Jump. Is that what's the name of the feature for
It's
this
called
year's
the distant
festival?
jump. Yes.
The Distant Jump. Please share more about
Well,
that.
distant jump is inspired by the Matrix. It has to do with a character who finds herself in and out of different dimensions, in and out of different places, and there's a secret cabal that is controlling that technology. It's not computers, not AI like the Matrix, but it's of government operatives that are using this as a kind of a test run for something that will um, apply and that will implement more on humans across the globe. So, by the way, the director of Distant Jump will be live in person. So he's
Okay.
Vince Hogan, I believe. He's flying from, I believe, Colorado, and that he should definitely be there to answer any Q&As regarding that. But it's a kind of film that definitely borrows from some of the narratives such as The Matrix, Jumpers, and other films that have come up in the last few years, including also the government black ops programs.
There's more sci-fi narratives recently that are centering on the government and being very suspicious. It's almost like the government in these stories are almost antagonists in the stories. You have, as you say, the secret cabals and the clandestine organizations. But then, too, it's interesting that you mentioned that the distant jump also centers on alternate realities because I see that theme reoccurring in current science fiction. Why do you think that is?
Because that's how people are experiencing the world. I think that this is something that came up. I was watching a couple of videos on YouTube, and there is a concept called control perception, which is it happens when you overwhelm somebody with confusing and contradictory data. The results, we end up latching automatically to something that's solid, grounded, no matter how bizarre it is. So the result is that you're essentially through this the proliferation of data on an unprecedented scale, people are essentially jumping and creating their own little universes, so to speak, through which, or reality tunnels through which they navigate their own world. And you can see proof of that all over the way people are reacting. Certain things they should be reacting and they're not, and other things they go way over out of control. So I think that the control perception, unlike sci-fi, is not necessarily designed by a one group. It's just simply the nature of this data apocalypse, so to speak, that's essentially being thrown on us. I mean, every day we have new stuff, and we humans are our brain is about it's only a few 100,000, maybe a million years old. It can only handle the bandwidth. So the result, people are just going in automatic. They're picking one specific field one area of behavior and just going for it, and they're just tuning out the rest. So the result is a kind of a echo chamber. I mean, it's almost an upside down world that's been created. So science fiction is pointing that out to us in a much more easy to digest format. The idea of alternate realities.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned echo chamber because definitely in our current political and social environment, people are, because of all the information that they're being inundated with,
Yeah.
they're seeking their own echo chambers, information that may not be based in fact or truth, but that confirms their own biases and beliefs. And I'm glad that there are more sci fi narratives coming out addressing that and what could be the fallout if we continue to silo ourselves off from that. So, what other films? I know all the films are very important to you and your programmers, but what other films really are jumping out at you with this current slate at the festival
Well,
this
there's
year?
one called like Tears in the Rain, whose phrase is borrowed from the Blade Runner.
I just recently rewatched
Yeah,
Blade Runner. Still powerful
very
film.
powerful. It's about an android that's dying and is desperately trying to pull memories for it from its own data files as to what it means to die. And
Mm.
it's a very touching film. It's a 7, 8 minute film. Definitely resonated. What other shorts that I think that are really good? There is one from Italy called Monetus, which is about a group of young girls who are walking into this dark, into a quote unquote supernatural forest. And the main character finds herself in another place all of a sudden. And when she returns back from that place, all the girls have been killed. There's a suggestion that there's a spirit inhabiting that space that caused her to kill the girls, although that's never really completely established. There's another one called Resonance, which has the quality of The Exorcist, as a I think it may have been shot on film, or perhaps the coloring with the filters they used were very film-like. Another one is The Silver Cord. Now that was shot in 16 millimeter. I have a kind of a soft spot because, as you know, my film, the first feature that I directed, The Final Equation, was shot in Super 16. So, and it's called The Silver Cord, which explores the auras and what's referred to as the doppelganger, the kind of second body, the subtle body, astral
Right.
projection. So very interesting. I mean, I think that what I'm looking at is a wide selection, and which is very satisfying because there are years when, say, half the films only talk about UFOs or androids, but this year there's a lot more diversity in their approach. They don't. It's almost like they realize that you don't have to follow any one trope out there. Just do your own thing. There's plenty of stories to explore in science fiction where you can be original and at the same time still have an audience that will follow you.
That's so encouraging that filmmakers are beginning to realize that, especially in the independent film world, that they can produce films that tell different narratives based on different themes in science fiction. They don't have to follow the blockbuster movie route where the films can be more focused on superficial visual effects and maybe lighter on story, that you can have a very solid film that is thought provoking and provocative, but not really heavily focused on visual effects. If you have them, great, but if not, you can still tell a solid story. I just rewatched The Twilight Zone, a
Mhm.
couple of
Yeah.
episodes, and that show is so far ahead of its time. And of course, when it was made, when you look at it by our current standards, it looks primitive, but the story itself, and you mentioned last year, the screenplays are so brilliantly written. And I think that that is important. What about the screenplays of the films that you're seeing?
You got to grab my attention within the first 10, 12 pages, and it's got to be easy to read. Sometimes I know in the beginning, if you're especially if you're creating a world building kind of screenplay, you want to spend a lot of time on the architecture. But sometimes they overdo it
Right.
and it becomes cluttered. What is this story about? If I don't get a sense by page 15 where I'm heading, or back page 20 in a 100-page screenplay, we don't consider that a good screenplay unless it's in the quote unquote experimental category, in which case there's
Right.
a little bit more latitude. But if it's this standard, you got to be able to grab my attention the first 5 pages. Very simple. And characterization. Characters, not just world building artifacts, but what's going on? How is this related to my life? So the most is if it's easy to read, that tends to be a good screenplay. And usually that's confirmed by if they've been in other competitions.
So it really does also need to have a hook as
The
well.
hook is important. Unless there are some screenplays that are more minimalist in nature. I mean, you looked at
Yes.
the say I don't know if you ever read the screenplay for 2001.
No.
It's only like 37 pages.
I've seen it though.
It's thin. It's like, and a lot of
Wow.
it, just like the movie, very slow moving, but those are exceptions. But in general, unless you let us know ahead of time, hey, this is very unusual, very experimental. We're using words in a very different sort of way, like say James Joyce wrote Ulysses, right? Then we'll keep an eye for that. But otherwise, we'll assume that after the first 5 or 10 pages, if we don't, where is this? So much is focused on the future, let's say 20, 50, 100 years from now, whether these advanced technologies. Well, that's interesting, but what about the characters? And please, you got to have characters that are not just always like, oh, he lost a wife, because that's an old trope.
I
Very
hate that
old,
trope.
very old, very old. It's been used so many times. Or I want to go back in time to fix something. Well, unfortunately, you have like thousands of movies and screenplays that deal with that. But there are other ways that are more intriguing. Don't go with the same old story of time travel and getting your girlfriend, trying to convince your girlfriend. They did that with Back to the Future, right? So we don't need another one like that.
Right. Or your girlfriend got murdered and you're trying to
Yeah, that's
avenge her
very
death.
boring.
It's all, yeah, just that worn out trope of using
Oh,
that as an
oh,
excuse.
and the messages, stories are out there. There is no
Right.
excuse not to be original. You just got to read. Read literature. Don't just watch other movies, but read the inspiration of those movies, which usually is rooted in books. For instance, Star Wars, the Force, was basically inspired, Lucas's, by Carlos Castaneda's books, which were written in the late 60s. So go back to reading literature. PKD, which we organized a PKD festival. His main inspiration were not other sci-fi writers. There were people like Proust and Balzac and Baudelaire and Faulkner. Not sci-fi. So there's a plethora. That's why we've had this screenwriting competition for some time, just to encourage writing, because it's more than ever just to rely on technology is a cheap way out. You really got to build a story.
Absolutely, I agree, Dan. And circling back to
Oh
AI,
yes.
in YouTube, there are so many short films that you can tell people just put in a prompt to spit out an AI narrative, and they are horrible. YouTube is just right now filled with them, and I'm sorry, they're just drag. So, when you were selecting short films for this year's festivals, what did you notice in terms of how the filmmakers that used AI, how were they using them? And what did you find maybe was helpful or not in the way that they were using AI to craft their films this
Well,
year?
first of all, what I find with films that are AI generated is a certain texture that's across all the films. You have a certain quality that you immediately know this is AI. The story is paramount. Anyone can just, yeah, as you said, enter a couple of phrases on AI and crank out a movie. You got to have a good story. And I've seen some good ones, but overall, there's still a lot of ground to be covered before it's totally convincing. And more than ever, the storytelling is what's going to set you apart.
One thing I did want to ask you that I noticed in the programming that Jonathan sent over to me is that there seems to be a lot more documentaries, which I find exciting as well. What attracted you to the documentaries that are featured in this year's festival? They sound fascinating. Like The Monster Man, for
Monster
one.
Man, well, the Monster Man is actually working with prosthetics. He's not AGI or AI effects. These are real hardcore prosthetics you're building here. So I think that attracted me. It's
Right.
almost like a reaction back to what the more processed kind of technology we see today. And
And isn't he trying to preserve classic,
he,
like,
yes, he
creatures?
has. He's got a museum that he has the creature of the Black Lagoon. Remember that? Yeah,
Yes,
he's got that.
yes.
He's got all kinds of stuff. Very retro, but very nostalgic. So I think that with his work is important. And I felt important to protect it, to really give it a voice. And he's doing well. And he's from the UK. The other documentary is Loch Ness, which I actually happened to go last year when I went to Europe. I went to Scotland, and one of my destinations is to go to Loch Ness. And it
See, Nessie?
Nessie never showed up, so I was a bit disappointed. But it's a beautiful lake. It's amazing. It's like I actually stayed
Oh,
at a hostel right by the lake. It's
wow.
beautiful in the morning.
Sounds
Oh
lovely.
yeah, yeah. It was just unbelievable. It's just going there, walking around. There was this little stretch, very small stretch, maybe about 50, maybe 200, 100 feet of shore that I could walk. Where there were no other hostels. It was a small little place, and it was at a time. It
Okay.
was around this time of the year when no one else was there. I was like there were only like 10 people in the hostel, so it wasn't busy. And there's another documentary that has to do with fandom, with sci-fi fandom.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It was so that one is about 30 minutes long. It's sort of a subculture within it. So I found that documentaries are also a good way to explore the the world of science fiction and how and the
Yes.
characters who are inhabiting that world.
I think that's fantastic. Dan, what are the dates of this year's New York Science Fiction Film Festival?
So we have September 19th and 20th, right?
Okay.
And
That's a Friday and
Friday and
Saturday, right?
Saturday. And also we have an online edition, which I didn't tell Jonathan about because we just added it recently.
Oh,
An
great.
online
So if you're not in the New York area, you can see the
anywhere.
programming?
If you're anywhere, you can catch. If you're not in, it doesn't matter. You can catch it. You're in Japan, you can catch it. In fact, I'm right now coordinating with some filmmakers that cannot attend the live version to show up online. So
That's
so
fantastic.
I've selected some of the what I consider some of the better films, and
Yes.
only shorts because features we don't want to show them in the online version. So that'll be an
Right.
online that's starting on
Okay.
September 18th. It will run for a full week.
Great.
On Friday, we have
Okay.
the live version, the in-person version. There'll be free popcorn for those who.
Where will it be held?
Oh,
What
that's going to be
venues are
held at the
you
Producers
using?
Club, right in
Okay.
right in the heart of Times Square.
So you all in New York City, you know where to go the weekend of the 18th, 19th, and
So we
20th.
start at 1 p.m. and we run till midnight. So
Okay.
it's 11, close to 12 hours or 11 hours of science
Wow.
fiction. And then if you want more, the next day you can meet us at Stewart Cinema and Cafe. And there is a theater. They actually run standard films, the first run films. So in Brooklyn. So
Okay.
if you're in Brooklyn, that's the place to go. An amazing concession stand is a really cozy, very intimate theater. And we start there at 2 and we run till 8 p.m.
Wow. It sounds like a perfect weekend. If you're a sci fi fan or a fan of speculative media, you all definitely, if you're in the New York area that weekend, that is September 19th and 20th, check that out. Dan, where can they go online to find out more information if they're in the area as far as where to purchase tickets? And also for everyone else who wants to watch the online programming, where can they go to get
The
information
best
about all
is
that?
New York Sci-Fi Fest.com.
Okay. And I'll definitely put that link in the
Yeah,
show notes for
absolutely, because
everyone.
as I mentioned, on Sunday we have two other films, two other features playing on Sunday. One is called The Strange
Great.
Dark,
Okay.
and the second one, and it's basically about a character who can see the future and how that's impacting his life. And the other one is called Rufus, the story basically inspired by Tales from the Crypt, except Rufus is kind of this homeless guy, and he basically is the main character who introduces these stories and how people end up in bad
Okay.
places.
I love a good
No,
anthology.
very nice. Yeah, definitely. I think that one is also an East Coast premiere. The director of both films will be there, both The Strange Dark and Rufus, and The Distant Jump director will be there. and we'll have plenty of directors from Brooklyn and other parts of the world as well. So there'll be Q&A after every single show, and of course, free popcorn.
Well, you can't ask for much more than that, Dan. And listen, everyone, again, I'm going to put the link to where you can find out more about the programming, where you can get tickets if you're in the New York area, and where you can also participate in the online program. And Dan, listen, thanks again, sir, for taking time to come back on the podcast to talk about the festival. It's always such an interesting and fantastic
Thank
conversation
you, Rod.
with
Perhaps
you.
one day you can join us live here in New.
That's my plan is to make I've never been to New York, and that's my plan is to eventually get there, and you guys have your festival right around my birthday, so that would be
What do you operate
fantastic.
out of, Tennessee or
No, I'm in
Arkansas?
Arkansas.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, Tennessee is our neighbor,
Got it.
but
All
yeah,
right. Well,
so I'm in
definitely
the
you
South
gotta
South.
make yourself way up here at least for a couple of days.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dan,
Thank
thank
you,
you so
Rod.
much for your time, and you're always welcome back on the
Thanks.
podcast. And there you have it, the latest conversation with Dan Abella, founder of the New York Science Fiction Film Festival. If you are in the New York area the weekend of September 18th, 19th, and 20th, then you need to do yourself a favor and go attend the festival. Dan and his team put together a slate of outstanding independent science fiction and fantasy short films, features, documentaries, and also Q&As with the filmmakers themselves, as well as an exciting screenplay competition that you don't want to miss. And if you're like me and live outside of the New York area, then definitely take advantage of the online programming that will be available for that weekend. I'm going to leave a link to the official website of the New York Science Fiction Film Festival so that you can find out more about how to attend, the cost of admission, and what the programming slate will look like. And that link will be in the show notes of this episode. Also in the show notes is our link tree that will take you to all of our presences on social media and our main website, the7thmatrix.com, where we have curated a host of terrific indie science fiction and fantasy short films, web series, and also our interviews with filmmakers that you are free to explore. I also need to ask you to leave us a review and rating wherever you get your podcasts, because that does help others find us. And then we also need your financial support, because without it, we would not be able to do the work that we do here on Ion Sci-Fi Podcast. That's it for this episode, everyone. And again, thank you for joining me. And until next time, remember to please take a break, escape the mundane, and enter the fantastic. Take care.